The Dragon's Return, Chapter 1, The Darkest Hour, Part 1.
You're going to be late,
A small voice said near Merlin's ear. She jerked awake, coming face to face with her pet owl Archimedes, who was letting out a warbling laugh. Glancing up at the window, Merlin let out a groan. There was still a sliver of moonlight coming through the now perpetually open window. You do know not all of us prefer nighttime, right? Merlin asked, rubbing her eyes as she turned to look at the bird. He'd grown quite a bit since she found him, not knowing at the time that he was not quite a natural creature himself. She still wasn't quite sure what he was, other than a menace to her sound sleep. But he was a good ear to speak to, and a good set of eyes to watch where she could not.
It's silly, but I know. I'm supposed to give you this,
Archimedes said, pushing a rather thick envelope closer to her. Merlin frowned, sitting up so she was leaning on the wall her bed rested against. Picking up the envelope, she smiled. The cramped handwriting was one she easily recognized as her father's. Balinor's contact had been infrequent for many reasons since her mother's death, but a few months ago he'd sent word through a mutual friend, Haldor, of a new dragon in the world. She only knew it was a blue dragon named Ilios, because her father had simply said her name is Ilios in his last letter, and included a scale of the purest sky blue. Reaching out, she carefully smoothed down Archimedes' feathers. "Thank you, Archimedes," she said, and he hooted before hopping into her lap.
Don't keep me in suspense. Open it,
the owl demanded. "Oh, hush, you'll wake Gaius," Merlin said, tapping the small owl on the beak. She carefully slipped the envelope open. There was a single sheet of paper there. The majority of the envelope was filled with what appeared to be more scales. "My dearest daughter, your charming companion has assured me that this will reach you without interception. Ilios and I have not yet discovered any more eggs in the old dens, but she is growing well and quickly. I have included a gift for you, something that you would have received on the completion of your training, had things been different. I know that you will be unable to wear them openly as of now, but perhaps someday things will be different. Know that I think of you often, my sweet girl, and miss you." The letter was not signed, likely in case Archimedes had been wrong about the interception. Merlin grinned down at the owl. "You've met Ilios, then. What's she like?"
like a large house cat who breathes smoke,
Archimedes said, puffing up his feathers.
She chased me around 2 caverns before your father called her to him.
Merlin stifled a laugh. "Did he know you were there?" she asked.
Well, no.
"May want to announce yourself next time. At the rate she seems to be growing, she'll be able to breathe fire before much longer," Merlin teased. Archimedes huffed. Merlin turned back to the envelope and turned it over on her blanket. She gasped. A set of delicate jewelry, fashioned from what had to be Ilios' shed scales, glimmered on the bedspread. She had no idea how he'd managed to forge these, but it included a small set of glimmering earrings, a delicate necklace, and a ring that looked not unlike the signet ring Arthur had worn since being named Prince Regent. The band of the ring was silver, the face the impossible delicate sky blue of Ilios' scales, and where the dragon of Pendragon reared on Arthur's ring swooped a bird in flight. It made Merlin smile. Pulling off a leather cord she wore under her shirt, she slipped the ring on it next to the one she'd been gifted by her friend Will on his deathbed. No one knew she had it. There would be no reason for them to be suspicious of this new addition. No one need know. Well, she might show Lancelot later. The feast, later that day, started well enough. As he'd said, Arthur began the dancing in the early evening with Merlin on his arm. Only a few murmurs passed through the crowd. Merlin saw Lady Emma grinning widely as Arthur spun her around the hall. The feast itself had just begun when Arthur stood to make his speech. Merlin couldn't help her private smile as he began to recite the one she'd written for him the night before. Merlin was standing off to the side. Despite Arthur's protests, there was not yet a place for her at the high table. She was still technically here as a servant. It was as everyone raised their glasses to Arthur's speech that everything went wrong. Time slowed, and a figure appeared in the center of the tables. She wore head-to-toe black. Her face was wrinkled and scarred. Her brittle-looking hair was nearly white, and her voice was echoing and seemed to reverberate through Merlin's entire being down to her very bones.
Emrys. Emrys. Emrys.
She called. Merlin felt as though her very blood was freezing. She didn't notice the figure vanish or time speed back up. She didn't feel the cup she was holding slip from numb fingers. She didn't feel herself fall or hit the floor. All she felt was cold as darkness slid over her. Lancelot spotted her falling before the others did and was already halfway across the hall before Merlin hit the floor. Gaius was next. There, though the other knights and Arthur were close behind. Lancelot nearly reeled back when he touched Merlin's face in a quick attempt to wake her. She was corpse cold. If it hadn't been for the rise and fall of her chest, he would have been convinced they were too late. He scooped her up off the floor. Arthur had gone pale. "You're needed here. Gawain, get the doors. One of us will let you know when she's awake," Lancelot assured Arthur. Gawain led the way out of the hall, Lancelot behind him carrying Merlin and Gaius bringing up the rear. They rushed to the physician's quarters. Lancelot laid her down on her bed and stepped back so Gaius could examine her. Gawain paced. "What's wrong?" "She's cold. I've never felt someone living that cold before," Lancelot said. "We need more blankets," Gaius called. Gawain ran off. Lancelot frowned. "Do you have any idea what happened?" Lancelot asked. Gaius shook his head. "I'm not sure. Get me some hawthorn. I need to try and improve her blood flow."